Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Ceraulo Sports Talk with me, Joe Ceraulo. Joining me this week, it's a man who frankly has too many damn credentials to list. One of the best play-by-play voices out there, Ian Eagle. Ian, thanks so much for joining the show.
Hey, what's up, Joe? Good to see you.
It's a pleasure to have you on. And now before we get to the interview, I have to admit something that I've wanted to do for a long time since we met down at Radio Row in Atlanta a little over a year ago. I've been dying to have a beer with the Birdman. So would you say that you're comfortable with that for the duration of the interview?
I am comfortable with it as long as we acknowledge that I did not approach you saying that I would like to have beers, that you approached me saying, hey, can I have a beer with the Birdman? I'm cool with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm ready. What do you got there, Ryan?
I'm breaking out some heavy dew. What is that? That's a Cape May White.
Okay.
Yeah.
A little more sophisticated than me.
You did not see that coming.
I did. I was thinking, I don't know why. I was thinking Sam Adams. I thought you were a Sam.
You know what? I have a Sam Adams in there. So you were in the right area. It's like people that claim they're mentalists. They just throw out whatever might stick. So you threw out Sam Adams. I'm feeling a Sam Adams. You're right. There is a Sam Adams. But I'm going with this.
I'm going with a Blue Moon. Don't be fooled by the Stella Glass. But
it's a similar brew. Yep.
Yeah. Cheers to a great interview.
Oh, that's nice. Here's the thing, Joe, most people don't realize I drink for all my interviews, but they're just audio normally. So nobody would know.
Yeah, it's great. The benefits of radio, you know, people think that everyone wants to be seen, but you can do so many more things on radio than television.
Yeah. What I have noticed during this pandemic, there have been a lot of bait and switches. There are people that are asking me to do interviews and they say it's for their podcast. So that brings to mind an audio only. But then like at the last minute, like, so I'll just send you the Zoom link. You're like, oh, wait, I have to bathe for this. This is very different.
It's why I gave you a week's notice. I know the Beths and the Eagle household come, you know, on a weekly basis. So
you did. We're on a rotation, and this just wasn't my day. But I superseded. I stepped in front of the line just to make sure that we could do this. You should also let people know that we're doing this interview at 7:30 in the morning.
Yeah, of course. Pre-recorded breakfast brews.
Yeah. Good.
I may not have gotten to graduate this semester, but the breakfast beers continue.
Yes. Yeah, you can bring that into your everyday life. I don't know if it'll allow you to be a functioning human being, but it is something you could have as a recurring theme.
Absolutely. Ian, you know, a lot of people don't know this, but your parents, Jack and Monica, if I'm not mistaken, both were entertainers in their own right. And one thing about you, obviously, yes, you've got the fundamentals down pat. You've been doing this so long, but you're probably the most entertaining play-by-play voice out there. Quick wit, great sense of humor on the air. How much of that has to do with your parents' experience as entertainers?
Joe, first of all, thank you for the compliment. How many beers have you had? Just to make
I'm about
sure.
a 6-pack deep.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. So you won't even remember making that statement about me being entertaining.
Not at all.
Yeah, my mom and dad were in the entertainment business. Mom was a singer and an actress. My dad was a comedian, an actor, and a musician, trumpet player, very accomplished trumpet player. That's really the first thing that he did. He dropped out of high school, Erasmus Hall High School in Brooklyn, and started traveling with bands, multiple bands, played with the Buddy Rich Band during one stretch, which was a highly accomplished band, and then transitioned to comedy when people in the band would tell him, hey, you're funnier than the guy they're paying to be the comedian. So eventually he did take the dive into comedy and then turned that into acting. Commercials is where he had the majority of his success, but did a few movies as well and TV shows. My mom ended up moving out to LA. My parents got divorced. She moved to LA, ended up on a couple different soap operas, including One Life to Live, eventually settled in Las Vegas, where she played Judy Garland in a show called Legends in Concert. Unfortunately, my mom died at a very young age. She was only 43 years old from lung cancer. And my dad, now it's hard to believe, but passed away more than 13 years ago. So they played a huge role in my life. They had a serious impact in my belief system and in my conviction that I could do this for a living. I went to them and told them at the age of 8 individually that I wanted to be a sports broadcaster. And both of them said, well, then that's what you'll do. No hesitation, no curious look. And we're talking about 1977, where that was not the normal thing that a kid would bring up, that they wanted to be a sportscaster. Both were very encouraging. My dad at that point said, well, that's great. That's what you're going to do. We back you. He said, you are going to have to get rid of your lisp. And I said, what lisp? I don't know what you're talking about. I had a lisp. I didn't even know. So my father gave me a tape recorder, and just completely self-trained, I would talk into that tape recorder day in and day out using exercises my father had recommended. And it took 1 week. 1 week, the lisp was gone. Every now and again, if it's raining really hard, it may come back. I don't know why that has some connection to it, but for the most part, that was the end of that. But yeah, both were very much positive in my belief that I could do this, even though I did nothing about it. It wasn't like they said, well, you're going to do this and this and this. There was nothing I did about it until I got to college at Syracuse. And other than some baseball cards on my bed and fictitious games, or occasionally in my shower that had really good acoustics, that's the only time that I would broadcast. Sometimes playing 3-on-3 with friends, basketball, but then eventually one would tell me that they wanted to punch me in the face, that I was getting annoying. So I stopped doing that.
That's fair. It's a solid reason to stop. Now, I talk about how you inflict your humor into your broadcasts. What's it like? You notice a lot of up and coming broadcasters try too hard sometimes to be funny.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to feel like, all right, I've got the fundamentals down, now I can be myself?
Yeah, it took a while. It was not instantaneous. I certainly made a conscious effort early in my career, because I did get started very young. I got opportunities at a young age that I wanted to establish credibility more than anything else. I didn't want anyone in the audience to use my age as an excuse. I wanted to show that I knew what I was talking about, I knew what I was doing, and I wanted to ease my way into it from a personality standpoint. A couple things happened that changed that. I started doing talk radio, and I realized that my repartee with callers was much better when I allowed myself to be myself and not play the part of a talk show host. And I realized, working with Mike and the Mad Dog and Howie Rose and other WFAN talk show hosts, that they were really at their best when they were balanced, and it wasn't all sports all the time, where they found some levity. So I think it started with WFAN, where I started to get my sea legs a bit. I was doing weekend overnights as my main shift for a year. All of 1992, I was on Friday night from midnight to 6 a.m. Saturday morning, Saturday night from midnight to 6 a.m. Sunday morning. And that was 12 hours of real estate. And trust me, there were a lot of people calling in at 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning that had a lot of these. So not specifically Cape May Brewing, but they had a lot of beers or other adult beverages. So for me to really embrace it and have fun with it, I would just go places with my humor. I got the play-by-play job with the Nets in 1994, and on radio, there were occasional spots where I would work in my real personality and my sense of humor, but for the most part, I was doing a straight play-by-play broadcast. Pre-game shows, I noticed there were more opportunities, post-game shows, post-game interviews. And then I got the TV job the next year on Sports Channel, and my partner was Bill Raftery. And I had gotten to know Raf the year before because I was traveling with the team as the radio announcer, and he was the analyst on TV. And that meant a lot of late nights with Bill. There were not a lot of early nights. He is a guy that would push it to 1, 2, 3 a.m. And I just assumed, well, that's what you do. It wasn't really until my third or fourth year that I realized that I could go home at midnight. I was allowed. Uh, so a lot of late nights with Bill. And then on the air, he was the same person. The same guy that was cracking us up at the dinner table was doing it on the air. And I realized very quickly that in order to keep up with him and rally with him, he wanted a partner. He didn't want to be punchline, punchline, punchline. He wanted fun, banter. So I'd say the midway point of my first year on TV, I just decided to let it rip. And I had a boss by the name of Pete Silverman who had hired me at Sports Channel, who had a really good sense of humor. And he called me about a third of the way through the season. And he said, "You're doing great." He said, "I know you're funny. It's okay for you to be funny on the air." And again, I had that feeling, no, credibility. Have to be serious, have to show people that I know the game and I'm prepared. And eventually I loosened that up, and I've taken that philosophy with me each step along the way. Not always in your face, a little more subtle based on my partner who I'm working with, based on the circumstance, based on the network I'm on, but always at least with a little bit of a view that you can bring some light moments to the forefront.
Yeah, and I actually wanted to bring up one of those moments that you sound like an announcer to someone who's casually watching, really not paying too close attention. They think they're getting play-by-play. But if you're actually paying attention to what's going on, it'll crack you up. It's the Antonio Brown punt return against Cleveland, where you just go, Brown, hurdles, kicks a man, and then get on with the play like nothing happened. How do you think so quickly on your feet in situations like that? I mean, you've dealt with a lot of crazy plays in the NFL, the Andre Johnson, Cortland Finnegan brawl. What's that like, being able to think on your feet like that in those moments?
Yeah, I think the key is to be immersed in the moment. And if you are truly in the moment, then you don't question what's coming out of your mouth next. You trust your instincts, and sometimes you believe you can go places that others may not expect you to go. If it's contrived, if it's not natural, then it's going to stand out and people sniff it out. So I did realize that early. You have to be authentic. If you're trying to find the next line, if you're trying to go viral, I'm not even on social media, so I can't even go viral if I wanted to. But if I was trying to go viral, then odds are people realize that it's not coming from a real place. So as long as I'm always in the moment and doing it in the spirit of what we're doing, not making fun of anybody, not lampooning, but if people feel like they're in on it, and some of my stuff is probably subtle, and if you don't know me, there might be that moment where you go, wait, what's he doing there? Is he trying to get a laugh? Is he not understanding what he just said? No, I'm always understanding what I said. I can assure you that. I always understand what's coming out of my mouth. I understand the references. I get it all. It's not based out of ignorance or naivete. And it's not something that you can write down ahead of time. It's something that you feel in the moment authentically. And those are the ones that usually connect. If you're trying too hard, then that's not going to work. People are going to know it. And if anything, they're going to start checking a box in their head of, I don't know if I really like that person's style. They're trying to hit me over the head with a phrase or something that usually just doesn't work.
Well, so now you mentioned different phrases, right? You've got two of them now shifting from football to basketball that are absolutely phenomenal. They're both for the same circumstance, both for dunks. Rack attack versus that's a man's jam. Now, what's the backstory behind each of those, and how do you decide when to use which?
Yeah, so rack attack, interesting story. when Lawrence Frank was the head coach of the Nets, we would get a chance to meet with him before the game. 10 minutes sometimes, 15 minutes, and oftentimes without a camera. Occasionally with a camera that would air as part of the pregame show, or we would chop it up and use it as sound bites within the game. But oftentimes, just a notebook in hand and him shooting off the cuff. And often that was some of the best material. And sometimes it was things that you could really use, or it was something that you would stow away and form your own opinion based on his for a future broadcast. So he kept saying this term in a meeting that I had never heard before. He kept saying, well, I think we can really get inside on Toronto, and we got to get a lot of rack attacks. And I was like, whoa, never heard that before. Later on, he said it again. He reiterated. So if we can get Aaron Williams in with a bunch of rack attack, I'm like, whoa, rack attack. So I just stored it away. 2 games later, we meet with him again, and he used the same terminology, and it caught our producer's ear as well. I didn't say a word, but our producer, Frank DeGrace, who's been doing it forever, he is exceptional and truly one of the best in his position. And I thought to myself, all right, I'm going to see if Frank's paying attention. So Annette goes in for a dunk in that particular game. It could have been Nanit Kristic. And I said, oh, Kristic on a rack attack. I just threw it in there. And we have talkback in television. The producer can talk to you in your headset. And I just hear in my headset, oh, that's good. That was from Lawrence.
And it just stuck.
It stuck. He loved it. Whoever I was working with at that time, could have been Mark Jackson, could have been Jim Spinarkle, could have been Mike Fratello. They reacted a little bit. We went to break and gave a wink. And then people started saying it back to me when I was out and about. And I realized, oh, wait, there's a little something there. Wordplay, if, again, it's not contrived, if it's coming from an authentic place, and this was completely authentic, Lawrence Frank said it in a meeting, rack attack. It rhymes, it works, and it tells the story very quickly. So I started using it. I started working it in more and more, and it's something that I certainly use today. I don't like to overuse anything. I like to try to vary it up over the course of a game. Man's Jam I used in college at Syracuse.
Okay.
Syracuse was playing Pitt my senior year, and Pitt had an outstanding team. Paul Evans was the head coach. They had Jason Matthews. I don't know if Sean Miller was there. I think he might have still been there. If not, he had just graduated, but I think he was still there. They had Bobby Martin, and they had a guy by the name of Brian Shorter, who was strapping, or at least in college, I thought he was like a tank. And I just remember he dunked. I don't know if Derek Coleman was in the poster, but he got inside and he finished strong. And I have no idea where it came from, other than it felt like he was a man among boys in that moment. And again, it just came out. It rhymed a little bit. And I said, oh, Brian Shorter, that's a man's jam. And now we're working with fellow students, as you can relate to, Joe.
Of course.
It's not a professional analyst. And I just remember whoever the analyst was, turned around and was like, ooh. So I ended up using it the next game, and I started using it on Syracuse plays. Derek Coleman certainly had a bunch of man jams, and then he had a bunch with the Nets when I was calling those games. And, it just always, to me, it told a little bit of a story that this was above and beyond your normal jam. This one had a little more to it, and that one stuck. I've had a little bit of adjustments to it. I've used grown man's move and other things to try to just vary it up. But the crux of it is still that this guy looked like he was a man among boys.
Wow. So that one goes back to Q's rack attack. You stole. off the Nets coach.
You know what? Here's the funny thing, Joe. I don't think Lawrence has any idea. I don't think he has any clue whatsoever that he said it and then I used it.
Yeah.
We've never talked about it. And Lawrence is a great guy. And I've obviously known him a long, long time. It's not like he's ever walked by me and given me a wink, like, hey, that one's for you. We've never talked about it whatsoever. If you ask Marv Albert about where he got yes, it was from an old NBA official that he and his friends would imitate when they played at the schoolyard. Yes, that would be the reaction of an official. He would say the word yes, and it counts, meaning the basket counts and the foul. And Marv turned it into a cottage industry.
That's incredible. Now, so many great calls of yours, football, basketball, tennis, you name it. I have to ask, not which one's your favorite, but Ian, what's your biggest maybe on-air flub? You talk about always being aware of what you're saying, always knowing what you're saying. Did you ever, especially in those earlier years, have a moment where you said something and you went, wish I could have taken that back?
I think everybody does. If you're in this business long enough, even if you're not in this business long enough, you're just on the air a lot. I do a lot of games over the course of a season, sometimes 5 games in a week in 5 different cities, and the travel and the wear and tear. I like to think that I can compartmentalize and I have steely focus and concentration, but your mind can wander, and certainly there are mistakes, none that come to mind specifically, and nothing that would have ever cost me my career. Look, you're always going to be in a position where you could get identification wrong or not analyze a situation quickly and accurately and get confused. That can happen anytime that you're on the air. It's the larger scope issues that you want to avoid, where you just miss the point of something, where something on the field or on the court happens and it just goes right by you somehow. So I like to keep those few and far between. I like to think that I have a good handle on the action in front of me, but trust me, Joe, it's not foolproof. There are times where it takes a moment for your brain to connect and fire on all cylinders when you need it most. And again, you just hope you can limit the damage. And that's why also you never, at least I try not to ever get into the personal side of things or mocking something or someone. You just don't know what the backstory is. And there's 2 sides to every story. You have to be honest in your approach and you have to report what you see, but don't go beyond your scope and don't speculate and use conjecture when it's not called for. And those are some of the tenets that I still live by today, even after banking as many NBA games as I've done, or NFL games, or French Opens, you name it. Just because you've done it over and over again doesn't mean that you're not susceptible to venturing off into uncharted territory and getting yourself in trouble when you don't have to.
Some really, really great advice. Never get too comfortable, too complacent with the situation, and let your guard down. Ian, you talk about the broader scope of things, right? Obviously, so much going on today in society, the pandemic, the protests of the past couple of weeks, police brutality, which, has been on the forefront of the National Football League for the past 4 years now. It's all stuff I want to get to in just a moment. But first, looking at the bright side, the NBA, which hasn't seen a game played since March 11th, is finally set to return. You'll be down in Orlando with the Nets. What are you looking for? How do you think this is going to go? Now, 22 teams in one city. How excited are you to be back?
Well, let's take it from 2 perspectives. First perspective, the broadcast perspective. As of right now, it does not look like broadcasters will be part of the bubble.
Really?
The local teams, my understanding of it, now things can change and it's very fluid, but my understanding of it would be that most teams, if not all, will be responsible for producing a broadcast off of a feed that's provided to them by the NBA and in conjunction with their partners. and it would be almost acting as if it was a world feed. And you then would voice to the pictures that you see from a remote location in your respective city with a headset on, in a studio, off a large monitor. It's something that I've done. I have experience doing it. I did the 2013 finals that way from a studio in Secaucus, New Jersey, Miami, San Antonio. I've done World Basketball Championships that way. I've done tennis events that way. I've done golf events that way. So it's not foreign to me. Is it the best situation that you can ask for as a broadcaster? Of course not. You want to be at the event. You want to be inside the venue so you can do your job to the best of your ability. Is it potentially the option that's going to be given? It appears that way. So that's the first part of it. I don't know if teams are going to fight this. I don't think they are. There's a limit to how many people are going to be allowed in. And I just don't think broadcasters are going to be a priority in this particular case. Second part, the more important part for the fans, what's this going to look like? What's it going to sound like? What's it going to feel like? We don't know. We're basically at stage 2, about to enter stage 3. Stage 1 was the players and the league agreeing that they wanted to try to resume the season, and then considering all the plans that were out there and all the contingencies that were on the table. And the NBA looked at everything. Every rumor that you heard, every report that was out there, they investigated it. They looked into it. Was it feasible? Was it possible? Is it sustainable? Phase 2, step 2, was actually putting it on paper and agreeing upon a format. That's where we're at. 22 teams going to Orlando, 8 games to determine who's going to be part of the playoffs, and then follow the normal playoff routine: 4 out of 7 first round, conference semifinals 4 out of 7, conference finals 4 out of 7, NBA finals 4 out of 7. No travel, so that takes that element out of it. Everybody is within the structured bubble, and away we go. Phase 3 is where we are now, just entering it, figuring out the logistics of how all of this is going to work, and making sure that the players and coaches and staff members are safe and are on board and are comfortable with every circumstance, potential circumstance that's out there. So to say that it's going to be smooth sailing from here on out wouldn't be a fair statement. There are going to be hurdles. There are going to be challenges. There are going to be a load of questions from participants, from media, from fans. And it's going to be the NBA's job to prepare themselves for any question that comes their way with an answer. And if they don't have an answer, to then figure out what the answer will be, because this is unprecedented. We are entering into a stretch, not just in the world, but certainly within the smaller structure of sports, of things that we just haven't seen before. And there are going to be some pitfalls along the way that everybody's got to be prepared for.
Yeah, this is, like you said, it's definitely a work in progress, a total test run right here. We've never seen anything like this. You've got events being canceled that weren't even canceled for World War II, 80 years ago.
Yep.
But while you'll be going back to work with the Brooklyn Nets, your son will also be going back to work. And there's a good chance that the Nets will make the playoffs. They're in a pretty good position right now. Your son definitely will have work with the LA Clippers. How proud are you? Like, how amazing is it for you to see what Noah's done such a young age, 22, 23? Such a young age, right out of school, to see him be the radio voice of the Los Angeles Clippers. What's that like?
Yeah, Joe, the straight answer is proud doesn't even begin to describe the emotion involved in this. What he's done, I have stronger feelings for than what I've done. So whatever it is that I've accomplished in my life, to me, I put to the side the fact that my son was even interested in what I did for a living, that's a compliment. That he wanted to actually enter the field is flattering, beyond flattering. And then to have success and to handle himself in the way that he does and treat people the way that he does and have the command that he's had at a young age, that part goes just above and beyond. So it's been wonderful for my family, my wife, Elisa, who is incredible. And I've known, dated in college, broke up at the end of college, got back together, broke up again, got back together, got engaged, got married. My daughter, Erin, who goes to Syracuse and will be entering her senior year. It's just a lot of pride for the entire family. And we know what went into it. We understand because we saw the work, we saw the drive, the determination, we saw his ability, and we saw all the stages along the way. A kid that was not intimidated by going up in front of a group and doing whatever was asked of him. Performance was not an issue for him. So to see it all come together and to now have this other part of our relationship that is so special, because it's not even just father-son, which was already off the charts, connected and really unique. But now the fact that we can relate to one another on a level that I did not anticipate this quickly is pretty astounding.
Yeah, it's incredible. And Ian, before I let you go, we talk about the great work that your son's done in the profession already. You mentioned before you don't have social media, but Noah obviously does. And I recommend go follow him on Twitter. He's a great follow. What's it like for you to see not just the work he's doing, but also how he's using his voice so maturely? Last week he sent a tweet out. It was a simple tweet, but it stuck with me. He said, take 2 minutes and a first step in the right direction. And he attached a link to a voter registration page on vote.org.
Yeah.
To see him at 22, 23 years old, just have the maturity and the wherewithal to know that he's living the life, but there are still bigger issues, and he has an impactful, influential voice.
Yeah.
What's that mean to you?
Yeah, Joe, I think this has been a very challenging time for a lot of people to figure out how they want to approach certain issues. And remaining quiet and silent is really no longer an option. Maybe it used to be, and we viewed it as silence could mean, well, you don't really know where I'm coming from. Look, I've spent my whole career trying to put my assignments as the most important part of what I do. It's not about me. It's about the game. It's about the athletes that I cover, the coaches, the stories, the moments, chronicling them, and not making myself any part of it. That was in my brain from day one. You are not the story. If you do radio talk, the lines blur because people are listening for your opinions and they want to hear what you have to say. So early in my career, I did have to adapt and adjust my thought process that, wait a second, my opinions matter, and what I say will be scrutinized, and people are going to put to memory the proclamations that I make. So you better speak with conviction, but you better be educated in what you say, and you better have an understanding of your subject matter. So with Noah in particular, as long as he has an awareness of what he's sending out and that there's a cause and effect and that people are going to form opinions on you based on that, as long as you're comfortable with that, then I have no issue with it. Really, the concerns I have are for people that haphazardly just share in a moment, don't think it through, don't think about the ramifications of what they're doing. So where we are right now, which I'm hoping is a turning point, a true turning point in our world, not just in our country, but in our world. And that's asking a lot. We've had many issues before, and we haven't collectively learned from them. We've fallen back into old habits. What I hope this has created is a time where people are more open to understanding other people's plight and understanding where they're coming from. So that means a greater awareness of our fellow man. And also, my hope is that this next generation, you and Noah and Aaron and those younger than you, can take it upon yourself that you are more educated and you are more aware of how all of this works and how one thing affects another. So my hope is that this is not just a turning point, but a starting point of people coming together a bit more and finding connectivity. It sounds a bit Pollyannic, and I know there are going to be ignorant people and people that don't want to learn and don't want to change, and they say, hey, my life's great, I don't care. It does require an unselfishness, and it requires you to open up your mind, and it requires you to see things through the eyes of someone else. And that's what I've preached to my kids, my wife and I, over the years. We have always tried to teach that. It begins in the home, no doubt. But if you're a racist and you're teaching racism in your own home, that means there's going to be another racist, another generation of racists. So my hope is that eventually one day, and I hope it's very soon, we have to start in the classroom. And I'm talking about from kindergarten on. Every year you would take a course dealing in racism. Not one class over the course of your high school life. I mean, every single year. I use this analogy, and of course it pales in comparison. But when I was growing up, smoking was incredibly prevalent. My mom smoked. She died of lung cancer at 43 years old. So I learned the hard way of what that can do to a person. But they were smoking in bars, they were smoking in restaurants, they were smoking on airplanes, they were smoking on trains. Everywhere you went, people were smoking. I noticed with my kids, as they were going through grade school, middle school, high school, it was pounded into their head, smoking is bad. Do not smoke.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And Joe, I don't want to speak for you, but I know for my kids and for their friends, they don't smoke. They don't smoke cigarettes.
Same here.
It's not a common thing because you learned at an early age, don't do this. So it's learned behavior. Racism is learned behavior. My point is, if we can change the way that we educate people from an early age, you don't come out of the womb a racist. It's something that you pick up along the way. Let's change that. Let's educate people early and every year of their schooling. Every year. And I don't care who you are. I don't care what school you go to. It's part of the curriculum. And maybe your kids or your kids' kids can enter into a different kind of world where this is not as big an issue. And what did we do with smokers? We basically ostracized them. We told them, all right, you want to smoke? Go outside. You can't stay in the restaurant. You can't stay in the bar. You can't stay on the plane. You can't do it. I'm thinking that we can do the same with racists. We can ostracize them. Like, hey, you can't be a part of this. You're going to have to go over there. That's my hope, at least.
I hope so too. Ian, as always, hitting the nail on the head. Thanks so much for taking the time out to join me here today.
All right, Joe. I still have a third of a beer left. So
enjoy. I got to catch up to you then.
Man, yeah, you are slowing down in your old age, man.
Yeah, you know, this new generation of college kids, we can't throw them back like your generation could.
That's right.
Ian Eagle, one of the best out there. Thanks so much for joining me on this episode of Ceraulo Sports Talk.